I studied at Cambridge University, which is where Milton was also a student, and people from that place have always been subversive and revolutionary. In fact, it started with a group of people who couldn't stand Oxford University and ran off to the Fens to live there. Of course, they supported the Commonwealth, the Puritan Commonwealth, with people like Cromwell and John Milton himself. The college I was at, Emmanuel, was founded in order to sway the study of religion as far as possible towards the Puritan and subversive. And in fact, it produced at least two famous products, one of which I'm sure you know, well, probably both. John Harvard, whose library was the foundation for that college, and the other, perhaps more significant for me personally, is Emmanuel Gulliver, but I don't know quite what you'll make of that as an example of Emmanuel graduates. Anyway, my room overlooked Christ College front court, which is where Milton actually probably lived when he was a student there, and Christ was another of these subversive colleges. Milton was very popular, of course, in revolutionary America because of his anti-monarchical views and his love of free speech. And he continued to dominate Western literature, of course, in the Romantic period, because he was fascinating to William Blake, who even wrote an epic poem about him, as well as illustrating all the poems. And Shelley, of course, revived interest in Paradise Lost by making Satan the hero. And Wordsworth imitated Milton's sonnets and celebrated the French Revolution in the same spirit in the prelude that Milton did in his own period. The English literary canon for the English major, when it was invented in the late 19th century, always started with Chaucer, Shakespeare, and Milton. But Milton became very unpopular in the middle of the 20th century, and what's happened is very interesting. At that time, conservatives like T.S. Eliot didn't approve of his revolutionary attitudes, and the new critics didn't like the epic style, and the women thought that Milton was a misogynist, which I find quite startling because his view of marriage turns out to be the very opposite of macho physical domination and very much a matter of psychological interrelationship, which is what I hope to show is a major theme of much of Milton's writings. The hostility was reversed in the later period by people from Oxford, interestingly enough. One of my friends, Christopher Ricks, started a revolution in favor of Milton. And of course, C.S. Lewis, whom many of you will know, he used Milton as a model in such novels as Perelandra. And Milton also influenced, I think, many other examples of science fiction and fantasy, such as Pullman's His Dark Materials. The very title is taken from Milton, and we'll be talking about all these, not to ignore cinematic epics like Star Wars and Avatar, which I think are, in fact, surprisingly, consequences in some ways of Milton's way of looking at things. A year or so ago, I discovered there was a new digital game called the Talus Principle, which we'll talk about. It updated Paradise Lost with a robot Adam seeking post-human identity, ruled by a Judaic creator and with an advisor, surprisingly, called Milton. Milton actually was always popular in Berkeley, perhaps understandably, in the 60s and 70s. My course at that point reached about 200 students on a regular basis, and we staged Paradise Lost, not in the original costume, I hasten to add, and Comus. And you might be surprised to know that Comus has enormous influence on Western culture. Not least, all of you know about the New Orleans Carnival, which was upgraded, almost invented by a crew called Comus, which still is the primary organizers of that New Orleans festival. The other thing I want to stress is, of course, the way in which the music of Handel influenced the performance of all these works, and we're going to have Handel's setting of L'Allegro nel Penseroso by Mark Morris just after the course finishes. So in a sense, this is a kind of climax, which I hope will be illustrated by the way we approach it. And the final thing, of course, is Samson Agonistes, which Handel wonderfully set and is a part of modern performance. It also is, unfortunately, a wonderful study of the terrorist state of mind, and it's all too relevant, I think, to what we've already heard mentioned, Paris and San Bernardino. And I want to hope to show you how Milton's triumph of his own failures, dismissal from university, collapsed marriage, blindness, a restored monarchy threatening his death, were turned into successes by a kind of therapeutic process, which I think may be valuable to our own rather downbeat age, dare I say. Anyway, you might like to follow up what I'm saying. We have a website at Milton Revealed, which I think will fill out the kind of thing the course will be talking about. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Professor Richmond.